I have the ability to see how people will die. The day my divorce is finalized, I'm hit by an electric scooter and sent flying. When I wake up, I see a line of text above the nurse's head. It reads, 27 years old. Breast cancer in 8 years. I pick up my phone. The first name in my contacts is my ex-wife, Caroline Meyer. After a moment's hesitation, I open her social media. Her latest post shows her and her new boyfriend vacationing in Marencia, captioned, "Forever starts with you." The location tag says it was posted 3 hours ago. We only finalized our divorce the day before. Later, I get a voice message from my daughter. "Daddy, Mommy says I can't go to her new house anymore. Her boyfriend doesn't like kids." I clutch my phone and head out to pick her up, only to run into Caroline's father, John Meyer, outside the apartment building. Above his head, the words read, 62 years old. Carbon monoxide poisoning in 3 months. The moment John sees me, he starts yelling, "What a loser. My daughter should have divorced you years ago. Her new boyfriend is young, handsome, and owns 3 houses. What do you have?" I glance at the words above his head, then slowly delete the warning text message I'd already typed out. After that, I take my daughter's hand and say, "Come on. I'm taking you out for burgers." At the diner, my daughter, Haley Coleman, kept placing fries on my plate. "Eat up, Daddy. You've gotten so skinny." She was only 6, but she already knew how to read the room. I had just picked up my fork when my phone buzzed again. It was a text from my ex-wife, Caroline Meyer. "Figure out Haley's school fees yourself. I have a car payment to worry about." Funny how she could afford flights to Marencia, though. I didn't reply and turned my phone face down on the table. Right then, Haley asked quietly, "Daddy, does Mommy not want us anymore?" "Mommy doesn't want to be with me anymore. But she'll always be your mom." The words sounded hollow even to me. After all, what kind of mother wouldn't even pay for her own daughter's education? Halfway through the meal, my phone rang. This time, it was Caroline's father, John Meyer. The instant I answered, he started tearing into me. "Listen carefully, Gavin Coleman. My daughter did you a favor by letting you walk away with nothing. The house is in my name, so don't think you're getting a single dime. Also, don't bring Haley back here again. The Meyer family doesn't need a granddaughter. Caroline will be giving me a healthy grandson soon enough." He went on for 3 minutes, but I never said a word. All I could think about was the line of text above his head. 62 years old. Carbon monoxide poisoning in 3 months. "Cat got your tongue?" John barked. "Yeah, guess it did." With that, I hung up. By then, Haley had already finished all her food. Her little hands were covered in grease as she wiped her mouth with a napkin. "Daddy, did Grandpa yell at you again?" "No. Grandpa said he misses you." Haley tilted her head and thought for a beat. "But Grandpa said I was a burden last time he saw me." Unfortunately, 6-year-olds remembered everything. After I paid the bill, I took Haley's hand and walked her home. As we reached the package lockers at the apartment entrance, my phone buzzed with a notification from a delivery app. My application to become a driver had been approved. So starting tomorrow, I'd be a delivery driver. Being a security guard didn't pay enough, and the factory shifts gave me no flexibility. I wouldn't be able to pick Haley up after school. Food delivery was the only option that gave me flexible hours. Besides, the more I worked, the more I could earn. When we got back to the apartment, Haley fell asleep almost immediately. I sat beside the bed and opened my photo gallery. Our wedding photos were still there. Caroline had worn a borrowed wedding dress that day, her smile bright. Back then, she'd said, "Gavin, someday things will get better." 7 years of marriage. Just when the hard times were finally behind us, she walked away. Without hesitation, I deleted every photo of Caroline from my phone. Then, I opened the delivery app and checked tomorrow's weather forecast. A light rain was expected. Rainy days meant more orders. It was time to get to work. On my first day as a delivery driver, I saw every kind of person this city had to offer. That morning, I left home at 7 a.m. and dropped Haley off at kindergarten. At the entrance, she grabbed onto the hem of my jacket and refused to let go. "Daddy, can you pick me up this afternoon?" "Of course. I promise I'll come get you," I replied. Then I hopped on my scooter and headed downtown to start running deliveries. My first delivery was to an office worker in a high-rise who had ordered a black coffee. When I brought it to her, she didn't even look up. She simply took the coffee and closed the door. Above her head was a line of text that read, 29 years old. Liver cancer in 12 years. My second delivery was for an elderly woman at the hospital. She had ordered a bowl of oatmeal. When I reached the hospital room, a gray-haired lady came out and took the bag from me with trembling hands. Above her head was another line of text. 71 years old. Heart attack in 5 months. I bit my lip and kept quiet. There was nothing I could do. Besides, it wasn't my place to interfere. By lunchtime, the delivery rush was in full swing. After running 12 orders back-to-back, my legs were aching. So I sat on the curb and ate some bread. Just then, a news alert popped up on my phone. Prominent businesswoman Susanna Jenkins has died of organ failure at the age of 69. Susanna Jenkins. I knew that name all too well. Back in high school, her daughter, Kelly Rhodes, had been my classmate. One day, Kelly invited me over, and I met her grandmother. I told her that her grandmother had 8 hours left to live. And sure enough, Mrs. Campbell held on for exactly 8 hours. Afterward, Susanna gave me $5 million. That money got me through university and made me believe my life was finally going to get better. But a year after graduation, I married Caroline. She was a woman who had fought her way out of a small rural town and had always been determined to climb the social ladder. The first time I met John, he'd asked, "How many houses do you own?" When I told him I didn't own any, the smile on his face faltered. Back then, Caroline said, "Dad, Gavin treats me well and he's got savings. That's enough." Was it really enough though? Over our 7-year marriage, I spent every penny of what remained on Caroline. It paid for her grad school, funded her startup, and bought the luxury car she used to keep up appearances. By the end of it, not a single dollar remained. Yet in return, all I got was an Instagram post from Marencia with the caption, "Forever starts with you." At 2 p.m., my phone rang. It was Caroline. "Gavin, you still have Haley's insurance card, right? Send it to me. I need to use it." "Haley's insurance card? What do you need it for?" I asked. Caroline replied, "I'm pregnant. I need it for my prenatal appointments. I can't find my own insurance card, so I'll just use Haley's for now and use whatever coverage is left on it." We'd been divorced for less than a week, and she was already pregnant. I didn't need to do the math to know when that had happened. "Caroline, you cheated on me while we were still married." Her voice remained calm as she said, "Don't make it sound so ugly. Lewis and I didn't officially get together until you moved out." Lewis Campbell was her young new boyfriend. I stayed on the line, waiting for Caroline to ask about Haley. Even just asking how Haley was doing would have been enough. But she never did. Instead, she went on, "Mail the insurance card today. Send it express. I'll pay for the shipping when it arrives." Having said that, Caroline hung up. I put my phone down. The rain had stopped. Sunlight broke through the clouds, falling across my soaked delivery jacket. I stood up, got back on my scooter, and continued running deliveries. On my 3rd day as a delivery driver, I got a strange order. The address was in an upscale neighborhood on the south side of town. The delivery instructions read, "Please ring the doorbell 3 times. Do not knock." So, I rang the bell 3 times. The door opened, and a woman in her 40s stepped out. She was wearing a silk robe with a strand of pearls around her neck. I happened to glance up as she took the order, and the words above her head made me freeze. 45 years old, strangled to death by the spouse in 2 days. My hand jerked, and I nearly dropped the delivery bag. The woman looked at me, asking, "Is something wrong?" "No." I handed her the food and turned to leave. After just a couple of steps, I stopped. I looked back. The woman was still standing in the doorway, checking the contents of the bag. "Is your husband good to you?" I asked. She looked up, her expression turning wary. "Why are you asking?" "No reason. Just be careful." With that, I got on my scooter and rode away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I tossed and turned, unable to get the woman's face out of my head. She tried to cover a faint bruise on her cheek with foundation, but I'd been close enough to notice it. The next day, I got another order for the same address. It was the same customer. This time, when the woman opened the door, a fresh cut ran from the edge of her eyebrow to her temple. The words above her head had changed. It read, 45 years old, strangled to death by the spouse in 1 day. My grip tightened around the bag as I handed her the food. Then I said, "Ma'am, you should call the police." "For what?" she asked softly. "Your husband hit you, didn't he?" The woman glanced at me before closing the door. I stayed where I was. A beat later, a man's voice came from inside. "Who was that?" "The delivery guy," the woman answered. "Stop ordering takeout. I'll cook for you," he said gently. I rode to the entrance of the apartment complex and sat there for 10 minutes. Then, I pulled out my phone and called 911. "Hello, there's a domestic violence situation at 14, Fairview Gardens apartment 302, on the south side of town. The woman has visible head injuries." "Are you calling about yourself?" the dispatcher asked. "No. I'm the delivery driver. I saw her injuries." "Thank you. I've got officers on the way to check on that." I didn't know whether the police could change anything, but the line of text above the woman's head had said 1 day. I had to do something. Around noon the next day, I was scrolling through the news when I saw a local news alert. Man arrested on domestic violence charges at Fairview Gardens, woman hospitalized. She hadn't died, so the words above her should have changed. Still, I couldn't be sure. I couldn't exactly see the tops of their heads in a news report, after all. But the woman was alive, and that was enough. That day, I completed 8 extra deliveries. It was enough to cover Haley's expenses for the week. On my 15th day as a delivery driver, John cornered me outside the entrance to Caroline's apartment complex. He stood in front of my scooter with a birdcage in hand. "Gavin, have you got no shame?" he snapped. "Caroline said you've been asking $3,000 a month from her for child support." "The court ordered it." John shot back. "Forget the court. You're delivering food for a living. Does it really cost $3,000 a month to raise a kid? Caroline's pregnant, and Lewis's expenses are high. Can't you ask for less?" I looked at the words above his head. They were still the same. 62 years old. Carbon monoxide poisoning in 2.5 months. The date was drawing nearer with every passing day. "Dad." Caroline's voice came from behind John. She walked out of the apartment building with a tall, stylish young man. That was none other than Lewis. It was my first time seeing him. He was dressed head to toe in designer streetwear, with limited edition sneakers and perfectly styled hair. The words above Lewis's head read, 26 years old. Car accident in 4 years. As soon as Caroline saw me, she stopped short. "What are you doing here?" "I'm here to pick up Haley's things. She still has some clothes at your place," I replied. Caroline frowned, then turned to Lewis. "Wait for me in the car." He didn't move. Instead, he sized me up before letting out a scoff. "So this is your ex-husband? Man, he looks rough. No wonder you dumped him." Lewis was 5 years younger than me and carried himself like a spoiled rich kid. I couldn't be bothered with him. Moments later, Caroline tossed a plastic bag at me. Inside were 3 of Haley's old clothes and a stuffed bunny with one ear missing. It had always been Haley's favorite toy, yet John had cut off one of its ears. He insisted little girls shouldn't play with soft toys like that, and that they distracted kids from things that actually mattered. Haley was only 4 at the time, and she'd spent the entire afternoon crying. I took the bag and turned to leave, but John spoke again. "Hold on. We need to talk about the child support. The court ordered $3,000. Just pay that amount," I said flatly. $3,000? Are you kidding me?" John barked. "Caroline's pregnant, and Lewis needs money for an investment. That's your problem." John slammed his palm against the back of my electric scooter. "Let me tell you something. Every penny Caroline earns belongs to this family. An outsider like you isn't entitled to any of it." Without saying a word, I hung the plastic bag on the handlebars and started the scooter. John was still cursing at me, while Lewis stood beside him, casually scrolling through his phone. And Caroline never said a word in my defense the entire time. As I rode out of the neighborhood, I passed a dumpster. An older man was crouching beside it, collecting recyclables. The words above his head read, 58 years old. Will die of old age in 23 years. A peaceful death from old age was the best ending I'd seen yet. Out of nowhere, I found myself envying a man who made his living digging through other people's trash. That night, Haley fell asleep clutching her one-eared stuffed bunny. I sat by the window and totaled up what I'd earned that month. I'd made $4,800 from 15 days of deliveries. Rent was $1,500, Haley's kindergarten fees were $1,200, and groceries came to about $1,000. Then there were the scooter's charging costs and my phone bill. After paying for everything, I was left with $110. That was all the money Haley and I had left. At that moment, my phone buzzed, and a text from Caroline popped up. "I'll be a few days late on this month's child support. Lewis has his eyes on a watch, so I want to get that for him first." I slid my phone under my pillow without replying. I stared at the long crack running across the ceiling and made a decision. I wasn't going to let this ability go to waste. Years ago, Susanna had paid me $5 million for a single reading. How many people in this city wanted to know how they were going to die? How many would pay to change their fate? I was done being a saint. I was going to use these eyes to provide for Haley and me. It took me 3 days to come up with a plan. After all, I couldn't just walk up to strangers and tell them how they were going to die like I had when I was younger. That would freak people out and land me in trouble. So, I created a social media account called The Healthy Delivery Guy. The content was simple. Every day, I posted a story about someone I'd met on my deliveries. Of course, I changed all the identifying details. In the first video, I said, "I delivered food to a woman who had bruises on her face. Let's talk about what to do if you or someone you know is experiencing domestic abuse." With the recent Fairview Gardens news still fresh in everyone's mind, the video passed 50,000 views. In the second video, I said, "Office workers who survive on coffee and skip breakfast every day should watch out for these warning signs." That one reached 80,000 views. I never mentioned anything supernatural. I simply talked about the people I'd noticed, and framed everything as everyday health advice. By the time my account reached 20,000 followers, someone sent me a private message. It read, "Hey, can you tell if someone's sick? My mom's been complaining about headaches lately. Could you take a look?" But I didn't respond. It wasn't that I didn't want the money. I was waiting for a bigger catch. 2 weeks later, I picked up a $300 delivery for an office tower downtown. It was the most expensive delivery I'd ever gotten. When I checked the order, I realized it was a snack delivery for an entire office floor. The receptionist told me to leave everything on a table. As I carried the boxes inside, I noticed the conference room door was open, and about a dozen people sat around the table. At the head of the table sat a sharply dressed man in his early 40s with the unmistakable presence of someone in charge. Above his head, the words read, 43 years old. Brain hemorrhage in 1 year. Beside him stood a little boy, about 5, absorbed in a game on his tablet. And above the child's head were the words, 5 years old. Anaphylactic shock today. Today. I set the box down and glanced at the order note. Severe nut allergy. No nuts in any food items. The receptionist had placed the snack order. I opened one of the cake boxes and checked the ingredient list. Almond flour was listed near the top. Hey, I called out. That cake. By then, the receptionist had already picked up a box and was walking toward the conference room. Wait. I barked, stepping briskly into the doorway. The receptionist jolted, almost losing her grip on the pastry box. She whipped around, her face twisting in irritation. Excuse me? You're just supposed to leave the food on the outer table. What are you shouting for? The sharply dressed man at the head of the conference table paused mid-sentence, turning a piercing, dark-eyed gaze toward the door. The little boy beside him looked up from his tablet, swinging his legs against the chair. Is there a problem? The man asked, his voice low and commandingly calm. Above his head, the glowing text shimmered quietly, 43 years old. Brain hemorrhage in 1 year. Above his son's head, 5 years old. Anaphylactic shock today. That cake has almond flour, I said, pointing straight at the open box in the receptionist's hands. Check the receipt. The delivery note specifically requested no nuts due to a severe allergy. The receptionist scoffed, waving her hand dismissively. It's a gourmet vanilla sponge from a 5-star bakery. I ordered it myself. There are no nuts. Read the fine print on the side of the box, I interrupted, stepping into the room. Line 3 of the ingredient list contains refined almond flour and hazelnut extract. The man stood up instantly. The chair screeched against the hardwood floor. Snatched the box directly out of the receptionist's hands, his eyes scanning the tiny black text on the label. His face drained of color. Julian, the man said softly to the child, gently setting the boy's tablet aside. Did you touch any of the pastries yet? No, Daddy, the boy chirped. You said I had to wait until the meeting started. The man let out a long, shuddering breath. He closed the box slowly, turned and fired a look at the receptionist that made her step back into the hallway, stammering apologies. I didn't know, Mr. Vance. The bakery didn't mention. You're fired, he said flatly. Pack your desk and leave through security. He didn't wait for her to cry or plead. He walked right past her, stepping into the corridor until he stood less than 2 feet from me. Up close I could see the fine lines of exhaustion around his eyes. His name was Ethan Vance, founder and CEO of Vance Logistics, one of the largest shipping firms in the state. How did you know? Ethan asked, his dark eyes narrowing slightly as he studied my faded delivery jacket. The label is in 3-point font. You were standing 10 feet away when she picked it up. I have good eyes, I replied calmly, and I read the order slip when I picked up the food from the kitchen. I always check allergy notes. Ethan stared at me for a long, silent moment. Then he reached into his breast pocket, pulled out a silver money clip, and slid out a stack of $100 bills without even counting them. He held them out to me. My son has an anaphylactic reaction so severe his airway closes in under 90 seconds. You saved his life today. I looked at the stack of cash. It was at least $2,000, then looked up at the floating words above his head. 43 years old. Brain hemorrhage in 1 year. Keep the money, I said, pushing his hand away gently. I just did my job. But if you want to thank me, go get an MRI scan of your brain. Ethan's hand froze midair. His eyes widened slightly. What? You look stressed, and your left eyelid has a slight muscle twitch. I lied. Smoothly, drawing on health trivia I'd read on my breaks. Severe unmanaged pressure in the cranial blood vessels often presents like that before a major vessel ruptures. Get a high-resolution brain scan within the next month. Don't skip it. Without waiting for his response, I turned on my heel, picked up my empty thermal delivery bag, and walked out to my electric scooter. When I reached the street, I glanced up at the top-floor window of the Vance Logistics Tower. Ethan was standing by the glass, holding his little boy's hand, staring down at me. Above his head, the invisible text shifted slightly. The words brain hemorrhage in 1 year flickered, then vanished entirely, replaced by a new line. 78 years old. Natural causes in 35 years. I smiled slightly, put on my helmet, and kicked the scooter into gear. I couldn't save everyone, and I certainly wasn't going to play God for free. But saving a 5-year-old kid and an honest father who loved him? That was worth an afternoon's work. A week later, my social media account, The Healthy Delivery Guy, crossed 100,000 followers. The videos I posted were quiet, methodical, and packed with strange, unnaturally accurate health observations. I talked about early signs of pancreatic issues, subtle gait changes that preceded strokes, and home safety checks for gas leaks. I never mentioned my ability. I just framed everything as things I noticed while delivering food across the city. On a Tuesday afternoon, my phone rang. The caller ID was an unlisted private number. I swiped to answer. "Hello. Gavin Coleman?" A deep, familiar voice spoke through the speaker. It was Ethan Vance. "Mr. Vance," I said, pulling my scooter over to the curb near Haley's kindergarten. "How can I help you?" "I took your advice," Ethan said. The calm, icy composure he usually maintained sounded cracked, almost shaken. "I went to Mount Sinai Hospital 3 days ago for a comprehensive brain MRA. The neurologist found an unruptured, high-grade arteriovenous malformation in my left middle cerebral artery. They said it was a ticking time bomb. It could have ruptured at any moment within the year." He paused, letting out a breath that sounded like heavy machinery settling. "I had the preventative endovascular embolization procedure done yesterday morning. I'm sitting in my recovery room right now. The chief of neurosurgery told me that whoever spotted the subtle signs of that AVM saved my life." "I'm glad you're doing well, Mr. Vance," I said honestly. "I don't believe in coincidences, Gavin," Ethan said firmly. "You didn't just read an allergy tag, and you didn't just spot an eyelid twitch. You saw something. I don't know how, and I don't care to pry into your secrets. But I owe you 2 lives now, my son's and my own." "You don't owe me. I have transferred $50,000 to the bank account linked to your delivery driver profile," Ethan interrupted cleanly. "Consider it a retainer." My thumb twitched against the phone casing. $50,000. A retainer for what? I asked. "I run an elite network of business executives, investors, and public figures in this city," Ethan said. "A lot of very powerful, very wealthy people are terrified of dying unexpectedly. They hire top doctors, but doctors miss things. You don't. I want you to act as an independent health and safety consultant for select individuals I introduce to you. I'm a delivery driver, Mr. Vance." "You're whatever you choose to be, Gavin," Ethan replied. "If you want to keep riding that scooter in the rain, that's your choice. But if you want your daughter to attend the best private school in the state and never worry about rent again, my door is open." I looked through the wrought iron fence of the kindergarten yard. Haley was sitting on a yellow plastic bench, her little knees pulled to her chest, wearing her worn sweater. She was holding her one-eared stuffed bunny, watching the other kids play with expensive toys their parents had bought them. My heart twisted into a tight knot. "I accept," I said quietly into the receiver. "On one condition." "Name it." "Nobody learns my real name or my daughter's identity. Everything goes through you." "Agreed," Ethan said smoothly. "Welcome aboard, Gavin." By the second month after my divorce, my life had split into 2 completely different realities. During the day, I still rode my electric scooter, delivering meals to keep my cover intact and to keep my eyes trained on the streets. At night, after Haley went to sleep, I sat at my laptop reviewing confidential files and photo dossiers sent directly to me by Ethan Vance. Wealthy executives paid $5,000 just for me to look at a high-definition video recording of them walking into a room and give them a wellness assessment. My bank account balance grew steadily. $50,000, $120,000, $210,000. I paid off Haley's kindergarten fees for the entire year, hired a warm-vetted, elderly nanny named Mrs. Gable to watch her after school, and moved us into a bright, secure 2-bedroom apartment near the park. Meanwhile, Caroline and her family were sliding straight into hell. I found out through my old high school group chat. Caroline's young, stylish boyfriend, Louis, turned out to be nothing more than an arrogant con artist. He had taken $200,000 of Caroline's savings, money she had liquidated from her failed startup, promising to invest it in a high-yield crypto arbitrage fund. In reality, Louis had used the money to pay off his immense sports gambling debts and buy himself limited-edition designer clothes. When Caroline discovered the money was gone, she panicked. She went to her father, John Meyer, begging him to mortgage his house to bail them out. On a rainy Thursday evening, I was grabbing a coffee outside a convenience store near my old neighborhood when a dirty, loud horn blared beside me. An old, battered sedan pulled up to the curb. The door slammed open and John Meyer marched out, his face red and blotchy, reeking of cheap whiskey and stress. Above his head, the floating white text burned bright against the dark rain. 62 years old. Carbon monoxide poisoning in 3 days. The timer was down to 72 hours. Gavin. You piece of trash. John spat, stepping up to me and shoving his finger into my chest. I knew you were hiding money. Caroline told me you moved into a new apartment. I took a slow step back, wiping a drop of rain from my jacket. What do you want, John? What do I want? John barked, his voice drawing glances from passers-by. Caroline is 6 months pregnant. Louis ran off to Miami with her savings. The bank is threatening to foreclose on my house because I co-signed her business loans. You're her ex-husband. You need to give us $50,000 right now to clear the debt. I let out a soft, incredulous laugh. Are you insane? We're divorced. Caroline left me for Louis. You stood on my doorstep 2 months ago and told me I was a loser who deserved to walk away with nothing. That was before. John yelled, stepping closer, his yellowed teeth bared. You have a responsibility to this family. If my house gets seized, where is Caroline supposed to live? Where am I supposed to live? I looked at the text above his head. Carbon monoxide poisoning in 3 days. I knew why it was going to happen. John was notoriously cheap. He had refused to pay a licensed technician to service the 40-year-old gas furnace in his basement for over a decade. Last winter, he had patched a cracked exhaust flue with duct tape to save $200. With the cold front coming in this weekend, he'd turned that ancient furnace on. For the first time this year, the cracked pipe would fill his bedroom with odorless, invisible death while he slept. All I had to do was say one sentence. John, don't turn on your furnace. Get your gas lines checked. It would cost me nothing. It would take 3 seconds. I looked at John's furious, hateful face. I remembered how he had cut the ear off 4-year-old Haley's stuffed toy just to make her cry. I remembered how he called my daughter a burden. I remembered how he had stood by and smirked while Caroline threw her old clothes at my feet. John, I said, my voice ice cold. What? He snapped. Make sure you keep your windows closed this weekend, I said softly, a dark, terrifying smile touching the corners of my lips. It's going to be very cold. John sneered, spitting on the pavement near my boots. I don't need your advice. You pathetic loser. If you don't give us the money by tomorrow, I'm taking you to court for child support back pay. He turned on his heel, slammed his car door, and sped away into the night. I pulled out my phone, opened my contacts, and permanently blocked his number. Some people dug their own graves, stone by stone, insult by insult. I wasn't going to stand in the way of his shovel. Sunday morning broke cold and gray, thick frost covering the city streets. I was at home, sitting at the dining table, watching Haley eat blueberry pancakes that Mrs. Gable had freshly prepared. Sunlight poured through the large, clean windows of our new apartment. Daddy, Haley said, her mouth full of pancake. Can we go to the zoo today? Sure, sweetheart. I smiled, stroking her hair. We can see the pandas. Right then, my phone on the table began to vibrate violently. It was an emergency call from an unknown local number. I knew who it was before. I even picked it up. I swiped the screen and put it to my ear. Hello. A ragged, hysterical shriek tore through the speaker. It was Caroline. She was crying so hard she could barely form words. Gavin. Gavin, oh God, help me, she sobbed, her voice echoing as if she were standing in a cold, tiled corridor. It's Dad. He didn't wake up this morning. I kept my expression completely flat. My voice remained smooth, utterly unbothered. What happened? The paramedics. They said it was a gas leak. Caroline wailed, gasping for air. He turned on the basement heater last night. The whole house filled with carbon monoxide. The landlord found him this morning because the alarm in the hallway was beeped out. He's gone, Gavin. My dad is dead. I took a quiet sip of my coffee. That's terrible. I'm sorry for your loss. Gavin, you have to come to the hospital, she pleaded desperately. I don't have anyone left. Louis took my car and my money and blocked my number. The bank is coming to lock Dad's house tomorrow. I don't have anywhere to go, Gavin. Please come help me. Caroline, I said softly, cutting through her hysterical screams. She went quiet for a second, catching her breath. Yes. Are you coming? 2 months ago, I was hit by a scooter on the day our divorce was finalized, I said calmly. I had $30 in my bank account. I asked you if you could help pay for Haley's kindergarten fees, and you told me to figure it out myself, because you had a car payment to make. Gavin, I was wrong. I was confused. Louis tricked me. You also told me your family didn't need a granddaughter, I continued, ignoring her pleas. You let your father call my daughter a burden. You let him destroy her favorite toy. Gavin, please. I'm pregnant with your ex-father-in-law's grandchild. I mean, Louis's baby. I have no money. I have no home. Then you should do what I did, I said flatly. Go download a delivery app. The hours are flexible, and if you work hard enough, you might make enough to buy a sandwich. Gavin, you ruthless bastard. How can you be so heartless? She screamed, her voice cracking into madness. We were married for 7 years. And those 7 years cost me every dime I ever saved, I replied. Don't call this number again. I hung up the phone and immediately blacklisted her caller ID. I walked over to the kitchen, picked up Haley's small winter coat and held it open for her. Come on, Haley, I said with a warm smile. Put your coat on. The zoo is waiting. Haley giggled, slipping her arms into the sleeves. Yay, pandas. As we walked out the front door, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror. My eyes looked clear, sharp, and undisturbed. The dark world had tried to break me, but instead it had handed me the keys to my own destiny. 3 weeks after John Meyer's death, Ethan Vance arranged a meeting for me at an exclusive private club downtown. I sat in a leather armchair in a private cigar lounge, wearing a dark, custom-tailored suit that Ethan had gifted me. On the table across from me sat a man named Marcus Vance, Ethan's older brother, and a high-stakes hedge fund manager who oversaw billions in private capital. Marcus was 48 years old, possessing a sharp, ruthless demeanor. Floating above Marcus's head were the words, 48 years old, assassinated by poisoned wine in 4 days. I leaned back, swirling the sparkling water in my glass. Mr. Vance, I said smoothly, your primary business partner in your Zurich venture, the one with the gold watch and the slight limp, is planning to murder you on Thursday night during your celebration dinner. Marcus froze, his cigar hovering inches from his lips. His eyes turned razor sharp. That's a very bold accusation, Mr. Coleman. Julian and I have been partners for 15 years. He lost $80 million of your firm's money in an illegal offshore short position last month, I replied, pulling out a small notebook where I had noted down details from Ethan's preliminary briefing. He knows your auditors are arriving on Friday. If you die Thursday night, your estate enters a probate lock, and he assumes temporary voting control of the fund. Marcus stared at me. The color slowly drained from his face as the mathematical reality of what I was saying hit his analytical brain. How? How do you know about the Swiss short position? Marcus whispered. Only 3 people in the world know about that. I don't need to explain how I know, I said, setting my glass down. My fee for this information is $2 million, payable upon verification. Marcus swallowed hard, his throat moving nervously. He pulled out his phone with trembling fingers and dialed his head of internal audit. David. Marcus spoke into the phone, his voice cold as ice. I want a surprise. Forensic audit on Julian's Zurich accounts. Right now. Freeze his authorization. Keys immediately. A pause on the line. Then a frantic voice responded through the speaker, confirming the discrepancies. Marcus lowered the phone. He looked at me as if I were a supernatural force, wrapped in a human suit. The money will be in your account within the hour, Marcus said softly, his chest heaving. My God. Ethan wasn't exaggerating. You're a prophet. I'm just a man who pays attention, I replied, standing up and buttoning my jacket. Above Marcus's head, the text shifted. 82 years old. Heart failure in 34 years. As I stepped out of the private club into the cool evening air, my phone buzzed with a bank notification. Deposit received, $2 million. Account balance, $2,340,511.20. I stood on the sidewalk, taking a deep breath of the night air. In less than 3 months, I had gone from a bankrupt, divorced delivery driver sleeping on a thin mattress to a multi-millionaire whose words saved empires and brought down criminals. Right then, my eye caught a sudden commotion down the street. A loud engine roared as a flashy, orange sports car blew through a red light at 80 miles an hour, swerving wildly past pedestrians. I recognized that car. It was the custom Porsche that Lewis Campbell had bought, using the money he had stolen from Caroline and her late father. Above the driver's head, visible even through the tinted windshield, the glowing text pulsed violently. 26 years old. Car accident today. His 4-year timer had collapsed down to 0. His reckless, frantic fleeing from the law and his creditors had brought his fate crashing down to the present moment. Screech. A heavy construction truck carrying concrete beams pulled out from an intersection 200 yards ahead. Lewis didn't even have time to hit the brakes. The orange Porsche slammed beneath the heavy steel frame of the truck at terminal speed. A deafening roar of crushing metal and shattering glass echoed through the avenue, followed by an explosion of dark smoke. People gasped, screaming and reaching for their phones as crowd gathered around the wreck. I stood on the curb, 50 yards away, watching the black smoke rise into the night sky. I didn't run over. I didn't reach for my phone. I simply stood there, my hands rested comfortably in the pockets of my tailored coat. Louis was gone. John was gone. Caroline was broke, abandoned, and facing a life of poverty and bitter regret. The people who had treated my life and my daughter's future like trash had all been consumed by the very traps they had set for themselves. 2 years later, the morning sun shone bright over a sprawling 10-acre estate in the quiet hills outside the city. A magnificent 2-story house sat surrounded by manicured green lawns, a sparkling swimming pool, and a private horse stable. I stood on the stone back patio, holding a warm cup of dark roast coffee. I wore a comfortable cashmere sweater and jeans. I didn't need to ride a delivery scooter anymore. I was the founder and silent chairman of Apex Health and Risk Advisory, a discreet boutique firm that provided strategic risk management to the world's most powerful individuals. My fee was $1 million per consultation. I took only 2 clients a month. Daddy, look, a bright, joyful voice echoed across the lawn. 8-year-old Haley came running toward me, her long dark hair flying in the breeze. She wore riding boots and a crisp white shirt, holding a brand new, beautifully crafted stuffed bunny with 2 soft, complete ears. Behind her walked Mrs. Gable, smiling warmly as she carried a tray of fresh lemonade. Look, Daddy, Barnaby learned how to jump. Haley cheered, lifting her toy bunny into the air. I crouched down, opening my arms, and caught her as she threw herself into my lap, laughing happily. That's amazing, sweetheart, I smiled, kissing her forehead. Are you ready for your riding lesson? Yes. The instructor said I get to ride the white pony today, she giggled, her eyes sparkling with pure, unburdened joy. I looked at my daughter's radiant, happy face. Above her head, there was no text. No numbers, no causes of death, no timer. I had discovered a year ago that for the people I loved most, the people whose lives I had completely untangled from darkness, the numbers disappeared entirely, leaving behind only an open, endless horizon of possibilities. My phone on the patio table buzzed softly. It was a brief update from my legal team regarding Caroline. She was currently living in a small studio apartment in another state, working double shifts at a diner to support her newborn child, constantly harassed by collection agencies seeking payment for her late father's debts. She had tried to contact my lawyers 3 times last month, begging to see Haley, claiming she was a changed woman. My lawyers had shut her down instantly with a permanent restraining order. She would never step foot into Haley's world again. I put my phone away without reading the full report. Her life was a distant noise that could no longer reach my gates. Daddy, Haley asked, tilting her head as she looked at me. What are you looking at? I looked up at the bright blue sky above our home, feeling the warm sunlight on my face and the soft weight of my daughter holding my hand. Nothing, sweetheart, I said, picking her up in my arms and spinning her around, as she squealed with delight. Just looking at a beautiful day. The past was dead, the future was secured, and for the first time in my life, everything was exactly as it was meant to be.